Hey guys, and welcome. 17 months ago, on October 6, 2021, the beta for Battlefield 2042 started into its 4-day access period. It gave us a first impression of the next title of the series and of a lot of things we could expect. And I gotta be honest, I actually liked the beta back then, and it was the main reason I got back into Battlefield after a long break. But when cleaning up my HD drive a few days ago, I found a folder full of gameplay clips of these 4 days, and looking through them now is a bit like going back to your favorite childhood places and seeing them from the eye of an adult. It's still the same place, but you see everything more realistic. So when watching these clips, I had some good laughs, but also moments where I just shook my head and thought it's impossible that they released a beta like this. But then again, it's crazy to see how the game has changed since then and how much it has improved. And I thought it might be interesting for you guys to see this as well. But before I start with a comparison, let's have a quick look at the content we had access to during the beta and also its performance. So the only available mode was 128 player conquest, and there was also no collection or any weapon or specialist overview. You had to do everything during the match in the deploy screen. We also only had access to all-out warfare, cause Portal and Hazard Zone were not part of the beta, and there was also this old start screen that the game also launched with, and it was changed to the new version with the start of Season 1. The 4 specialists we got to play were Mackay, Boris, Casper and Falk, so one of each class, and there were also a variety of weapons, gadgets and vehicles available, including the Robot Dog Ranger. The performance of the beta was actually pretty okay compared to the launch of the game, even though I played it with my old PC back then. It was only able to run it on low settings with a frame rate of about 40 to 50 FPS, so not perfect, but it did work. What's interesting though is that the same PC was not able to run the game after update 3.2 anymore, where DICE made some changes to the usage of the CPU. However, there were also a lot of things changed during the first year when it comes to animations and effects, so this might explain the higher requirements as well. But now let's have a look at some comparisons of the beta and the state of the game today in Season 4, starting with the HUD elements and everything around it, cause that's the first point that caught my attention when watching those clips. And I was mostly surprised about the deploy screen, cause I hadn't had it in my memories like this. It actually looks like it was taken from a pre-alpha build of the game with those white circles around objectives, vehicles and squad mates, and the yellow line that showed where the tornado would be going through the map, or the overview for the vehicles with the crossed out icons when the vehicle was not available. But what made me really laugh here were the pictures of the 4 specialists, where they all look so heroic, but then again not really like soldiers or if they were going through all of the events that were described in the intro of the game. They looked more like they just came from a long and relaxing vacation. Today's style is so different from this, and DICE has changed their looks to this gritty, dirty and serious appearance, which is what they should look like. What's interesting though is that all of these 4 specialists had the same traits and gadgets back then that they have today, and they were only adjusted a little bit but never changed. Not like it is for other specialists like Rao or Crawford, but that's just on the side. Then there's the scoreboard, which was stripped down to this overview of your own performance and a bit of your squad's performance, so basically the same we got with the launch of the game, only in an earlier stage, but there was no real scoreboard like we have today. This was just added 4 months after the actual release. And what was also changed, but this happened before the release already, is the XP events and kill feed. Because back in the beta there was only a skull shown and the name of the player you have killed below it, and for an assist you got a hand instead of a skull. And that hand was probably the most weird icon I've ever seen for an assist, because it looked more like a stop sign instead of an assisting hand. And these symbols were one of the points with the most negative feedback after the beta, because players wanted to have more info on their screen and not this massively reduced version. For the release, this was changed to the same look we have now, only that we got a lot more customization options during the last 1.5 years and the actual damage numbers as well. XP events like healing or repairing were not existing at all in the beta, which made the game really hard to read, especially when it comes to team play actions. And in general, all XP events and also the gameplay hints, for example this revive hint here, looked like they were just placeholders compared to the day. One thing I liked, on the other hand, was the hit marker, because even though it was smaller than today, it was more dynamic and had a more modern look, and I actually wished they would have sticked with this design just a little bit bigger. The mess of information we had on screen during the beta, where you always saw all objectives with a distance in different colors, friendly vehicles and your squad mates as well, was also perfectly solved during the last 1.5 years. And now there's a truckload of customization options for all kinds of in-world icons, hot elements and the minimap, and also their opacity. So there were a lot of improvements made. Same for all the animations. Back in the beta, everything was totally clunky and some animations we had today did not even exist. The soldier movement looked stiff and unnatural and was a huge step backwards compared to Battlefield 5, where they had put so much more focus on all of this, probably even a bit too much. But 2042's beta was the exact opposite. The revive animation, for example, looked like it came from a low-budget indie title but not from a AAA series. When your teammate was unlucky and they got killed inside of a bush or close to it, you were not able to revive them at all, which caused a lot of deaths for me because I kept running for them anyhow. Or deploying Boris Sentry turret, that is a smooth and consistent animation today, but was nothing like this in the beta. Or when firing Falk's turret pistol, there was no outline around the teammate you were aiming at and also no audio feedback or XP event when you successfully hit them. You never really knew if the turret worked or not unless you paid close attention to your teammate's health bar. But what was actually the worst were all the melee interactions, no matter if you wanted to cut a fence, poke an enemy or do a takedown animation. Cause when trying to use your melee weapon, the only thing available were your fists, and that created some hilarious moments. Especially boxing through fences was one of my favorites. But the takedown animations took all of this to a completely new level, very literal sometimes. Besides this, however, there were also moments that left me in awe, like this tornado itself and the rocket launch or rocket explosion that are to this day some of my favorite moments, and I still love to watch them each and every time. So it wasn't all that bad, but the animations for interactions between the soldiers were on a pretty low level, and this went on with the vehicles, gadgets and weapons. There were gunners and pilots floating outside of the air vehicles almost all the time. The FXM missile launcher could be fired without actually locking onto something, and you never really knew where the missile went. You could quickly swap the ammo type on your weapon with the plus menu, and there was no additional reload animation like it is now. The elevators and doors on the map hadn't had any interact hints, even though you could interact with them. And I'm not even talking about some of the jump scare moments you could encounter when looking into another soldier's face, or the missing destruction that was even less than today. And after watching all of those clips, I was actually wondering why I even enjoyed the beta back then, because the gameplay shows pretty clear how really bad it was and in which state the game was back then. It was barely a shell of what it is today, and I know the developers said that the build of the beta was already 3 months old by the time, but if this is your only chance to show players what you've been working on and to convince them to buy your game before its actual release, and maybe even pay $100 or more for an Ultimate Edition, then why use a beta like this? I mean, I can understand that betas do have bugs and issues and do not have the same state as the final game. Well, it did showcase the state of the game though, since it was not much better at release, but then again, this beta was something else. However, I think the reason I was enjoying it back then was that I regularly playtest games in a very early stage, sometimes when they don't even have textures. And to do this, it takes a lot of imagination and maybe also experience to see what the game could be when it gets constantly improved. So I think I did the same with 2042 as well and saw it more like a playtest and a raw diamond that still needs loads of work and polishing, but will be beautiful when finished. The only problem here was that it wasn't in an early state or just a playtest, it was 5 weeks before release. And that's of course something different, especially when I charge $120 for an Ultimate Edition. Nevertheless, looking at the game now is like watching your little siblings grow up from a pain in the butt during early years and puberty to being wonderful, caring and successful human beings only a few years later. However, what I'm trying to say is that it's great to see how much the game has changed since the beta and since its release, and how much better it is now. And I saw other games that launched in a better state in 2042, but were not constantly improved, and then they were completely dead after only a few months. So what the developers did here definitely deserves respect. They stick to the game, did not give up on it, even though the player count massively dropped only a few weeks after the release, and the overall feedback was not very positive. They constantly improved it, added new content, listened to the feedback, and managed to get this game back on track and back to life. And I really hope they keep up the good work they've done so far, keep improving the title and keep listening to the player base, and also hopefully add more content and more seasons in the future. I think Battlefield 2042 and all of its players deserve it, even though it might never see the success it could have had when it would have launched in the state it is now. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and it was interesting for you to take a walk down memory lane and watch a bit of where the game has come from. And if that's the case, be sure to drop a like or a comment below and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Until then, thanks for watching and thanks to my members for the additional support. I'm the Catwoman and you are awesome.